hello everyone, good evening, and welcome to our lecture tonight. My name is Teresa Pelletier. I'm with the Olmsted Society. I've been a member for a long time. I'm also lucky enough this year to be the vice president, so some of our other members weren't available. So I'm introducing the lecturer tonight. I want to mention that the whole lecture series is a joint venture with the Olmsted Society and the Riverside Public Library. So I hope you're all members of the Olmsted Society and supporters of the library as well. We have Riverside TV here tonight filming the lecture, so for all of those at home who couldn't venture out in the cold tonight, it's available on the Olmsted website, which is olmstedsociety.org. It's also available on Riverside TV, on YouTube, and on Facebook. So, as well as this lecture, our previous lectures are available there, which we've had a couple of lectures recently. A representative of the Forest Preserve spoke, as well as Melinda Jones-Pruitt, who is a Riverside resident, spoke. Her lecture was on the bird's eye view of Riverside and the birds that you'll find in Riverside. So I encourage you to go and view both of those. As well, I want to mention that we have an upcoming lecture, the last for the year, which is John Binder. And John Binder is a scholar of organized crime, in particular the Chicago organization. So he'll be talking about, the kind of organized crime ties to the western suburbs, both in events and people. So that should be interesting. Again, that's December 4th. So tonight, I want to welcome Jennifer Baader. She is from our good neighbor, the Brookfield Zoo. And Jennifer is the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Brookfield Zoo. She manages legislative initiatives and elected official relationships at the federal, state, and local level. So she goes down to Springfield to lobby for the zoo and talk to people down there, as well as dealing with our local representatives, Ben Sells with Riverside and Brookfield, working on common initiatives. For instance, she says she's spent a lot of time on the bike path that we're trying to kind of make connections on the bike paths, and she's been working with the local municipalities on that. Jennifer graduated from Chicago Kent College School of Law. She has a long history with the zoo. She worked as an animal keeper while she was in college, and she's returning to the zoo after working with the Environmental Committee at the Illinois House of Representatives. So, from one zoo to another. Here she is, Jennifer.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Jennifer Baader. I want to thank the Olmsted Society and the library for having me here today to share a little bit of history about the zoo, a little bit about our conservation efforts, about what I do in particular at the zoo, and where we are headed in the future. So, as was already mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at the zoo, but that wasn't my first role. This is me in college when I was an animal keeper with one of my favorite buddies at the Children's Zoo. But in high school, I also participated in the Youth Volunteer Corps, which is also known as the King Conservation Science Scholar Program now. So for any young people looking to get involved and potentially have a long-term career at the zoo, these are good ways to start. So I developed a strong passion about speaking with guests about animals and conservation, and I wanted to take that passion beyond one-on-one conversations and do a little bit more policy work. So I attended law school and landed in Springfield as a legal counsel to the House of Representatives, responsible for the Environment and Energy Committees, among other issues. So it wasn't until I came back to the zoo this time around in a government affairs capacity that I really began to appreciate the history that surrounds this institution. For example, this is what you see when you enter the zoo through our main entrance today. But it didn't always look that way. It all started with the formation of the Forest Preserve District of Cook County in 1914. The growth and development of the forest preserves not only allowed Cook County residents to explore and treasure our local lands, but it also allowed for the formation of two sister institutions, the Brookfield Zoo and the Chicago Botanic Gardens. to carry the education, science, and conservation messages of the forest preserves beyond the boundaries of these amazing green spaces. In 1919, Edith Rockefeller McCormick, who's here in the center, the daughter of John D. Rockefeller, donated 83 acres of land to the forest preserves of Cook County for the sole purpose of creating a large, modern zoological park. She was inspired by her visits to Europe's barless zoos, many of which were designed by Carl Hagenbeck, who's on the right. The donation wasn't without cost. Edith offered her land to the Cook County Commissioners on the condition that it be used as a great modern zoo such as she had seen abroad. Also, the commissioners were to assume the back taxes, which they agreed to do. Edith Rockefeller McCormick explained her donation to the Daily News as such: "My fundamental idea in giving Chicago this opportunity for establishing a zoological garden of sufficient size to afford a duplication of the native haunts of animals was born not of my personal love for animals, but from my devotion to human beings. It is important that we have opportunity for scientific study of the processes in animals that we may better understand those processes in ourselves." Upon accepting the donation, the Forest Preserves created a committee on zoological gardens, which spent 3 years studying the exhibits, governance structure, and funding methods in zoological gardens in Cincinnati, Washington, Philadelphia, New York, Buffalo, and St. Louis. Upon completion of the study, the Forest Preserves formed the Chicago Zoological Society, modeled after the New York Zoological Society and the Art Institute of Chicago. John T. McCutcheon, noted cartoonist, big game hunter, and writer, was elected the first president of the society. In 1923, the state of Illinois approved legislation allowing for a public-private partnership between the Forest Preserves and the society. Shortly thereafter, a tax levy was passed to support the zoo, and the zoo officially opened in 1934. At that time, Charles Wacker, head of the Chicago Plan Commission, stated, "The establishment of the Chicago Zoological Garden is a step in diversifying and enhancing the attractions which the forest preserves have to offer, another means to draw the city dwellers from time to time into the health-saving outdoors, and thus refresh their outlook and renew their strength." So not everything was completed when the zoo opened, but opening day saw a crowd of over 58,000 guests, with an additional 25,000 turned away for lack of parking. So to put that into perspective, on a good day in the summer now, we get 25,000. That was double those guests on our opening day. And these are some of the 1935 original aerial shots of the zoo, where you can see the old water tower in the bottom right corner, and also the absence of the Roosevelt Fountain in the middle, which came much later. But a lot of those structures are still standing. You see the formal pool in the bottom, and all those structures around there. While they've changed over the years, and many people may have visited the swamp when it was the old primate house, but a lot of those buildings are still here today with their original architecture. So this is the south gate, this is the north gate, this is where the swamp is, and the pool, and this is where the living coast is.
No, the swamp is on the other side. That's the conservation.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. This is the swamp, this is the old reptile house.
Okay.
No, the Center for Conservation.
Yes.
So the open lot is where the monkeys would be then today?
Correct, right.
Okay.
Right here. The baboons, the old baboons, this is the Tropic World site.
Yes, that's what I
Yes.
think. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Some cool pictures to see. We also have the early south gate under construction, which was originally the main entrance. Now it's the secondary entrance, but you can still see my office there to the right. Later on, there was the addition of the tram that stopped at the gates and looped around the zoo. And the zoo still features the stunning buildings in the Italian Renaissance and Art Deco style, designed by Edwin H. Clark, a prominent Chicagoland architect. Many of the sculptures and art around the park were made by a team of New Deal WPA artists and residents from 1934 to 1938. This is a picture of them at their work. You can see some of these sculptures are around the current pond that's outside BZ Red Hot's on the mall. We also had beautiful painted maps in the old concession areas, as well as artistic animal tables. And many of these art pieces have been saved, and you can see some of them on display in the Discovery Center if you go. Some of them are both around the walls and in display cases in the Discovery Center lobby. Other artwork adorned the sides of the animal habitats. This is the original pachyderm house that's still standing today. It was revolutionary at the time for its soaring construction on the inside and intricate rockwork on the outside, which you can see in greater detail here when it was being constructed. The same innovative rockwork was used in the original polar bear habitat at the Bear Grottos. All of the animal habitats were revolutionary at the time for their barless moat system, which allowed guests to experience a view of the animals without bars, which was common at other institutions of the time. Brookfield Zoo was and remains an innovator in animal care and welfare. In 1937, the zoo was the first in North America to exhibit a giant panda named Su Lin.
Well, he died a year later after choking on a twig.
Well,
One year later.
Well, he was definitely had a big following while he was here at Brookfield Zoo. We were also the first zoo in the United States to successfully welcome the live birth of a black rhino in 1941 and an okapi in 1959. Brookfield Zoo continues to innovate in the field of animal care and welfare to this day. And just in 2016, we became the first zoo in the world to receive the Humane Certified Seal from the American Humane Association. Some of the species in the zoo's care have changed over time, as well as the exhibits. The original Seven Seas Panorama was built in 1961 and was the nation's first inland dolphin exhibit. Much beloved Olga the walrus arrived from the Copenhagen Zoo in 1962 and resided at Seven Seas until 1988. In 1987, Seven Seas expanded dramatically and reopened in the northeast side of the zoo. But many of the most beloved parts of the zoo have grown over time. The Children's Zoo and Farm first opened in 1953 and became Hamel Family Wild Encounters in 2015. Our original Children's Zoo program that connected guests with reptiles and small mammals within the zoo now travels out into the community to provide an enriching educational opportunity for those who may not otherwise be able to easily visit the zoo. Similarly, our mission has developed over the years, from our original charter for the foundation, maintenance, and control of zoological parks or gardens and other collections, the promotion of zoology and kindred subjects, the instruction and recreation of the public, the collection, holding, and expenditure of funds for zoological research and publication, the protection of wildlife, and kindred purposes, to today's slightly shorter but no less important mission to inspire conservation leadership by engaging people and communities with wildlife and nature. Today, Brookfield Zoo is many things. We're an economic engine. It pumps more than $150 million annually into the Illinois economy and supports the jobs of nearly 2,000 Illinois workers every year. We're a top tourism attraction. In 2017, Brookfield Zoo was the most popular paid cultural attraction in the Midwest, with over 2.2 million guests. And we're also an award-winning educational organization. Over 4,000 students are engaged in STEM learning in the community, and more than 200,000 students visit annually on field trips. But at the core of it all, animal care and welfare is our mission at the zoo and in the wild. We have a broad partnership approach to animal care and welfare. For example, thanks to the donation of a CT scanner from a local hospital, Brookfield Zoo is now home to the largest and most advanced CT scanner within a zoo setting. Veterinarians are able to identify specific health problems on a much wider range of species than was previously possible, as a CT unit can accommodate animals up to 660 pounds, such as an adult gorilla, tiger, or dolphin. We also employ the only board-certified veterinary radiologist, working full-time at a North American zoo, and house the first and only zoo-based anesthesia research program. whose primary goal is to advance the standards of care for anesthesia and pain management of non-domesticated animals. In 2018, staff traveled to institutions around the country to offer support and evaluate a new anesthesia protocol for gorillas, which will provide safer, more reliable recoveries. As a world-class animal welfare institution, CZS is continually making advances in veterinary services for the animals in its care. In 2018, the zoo witnessed the successful emergency appendectomy of a geriatric orangutan, which was made possible due to a unique collaboration between animal care and veterinary staff and the consultation of human surgeons. The Society's veterinary staff also performed the very first CT scan on a black rhinoceros to evaluate an obstructed nasal passageway. As you can see there, it was clearly a team effort with everyone from grounds and construction, our vet team, and our animal care team to get Layla on. It's a large piece of equipment that's picking her up so they can get her over to the CT scanner. And we have other examples of veterinary care, some of which the animals participate in themselves. And the zoo has a big focus on behavioral enrichment, which is an animal husbandry principle that seeks to enhance the quality of animal care by identifying and providing the environmental stimuli necessary for optimal well-being. In other words, it's providing opportunities for the animals to utilize their natural behaviors in managed care. Here, the African painted dogs are feeding on a carcass as a pack. You may have also seen food frozen for the polar bears. And at this time, we have over 17 different animal welfare research programs going on at the zoo. To highlight one, the zoo is taking the lead in the largest ever multi-institutional study of the welfare of cetaceans, whales and dolphins, in zoos and aquariums worldwide. Institutions like Brookfield Zoo that work with cetaceans are committed to understanding these animals' welfare and doing so in a scientifically rigorous way. In 2018, CZS was awarded an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant to study cetacean welfare within 44 institutions located across 7 countries, where scientists will gather data regarding approximately 300 dolphins and 20 beluga whales. The study, led by Brookfield Zoo, aims to uncover how cetaceans here and in other facilities around the world are impacted by 3 parameters: their physical habitat, environmental enrichment, and training they receive from their animal care specialists. The study includes observation, physical exams, and blood and fecal testing. Additionally, the dolphins wear D-tags, which you can see here, suction cup movement monitors that provide information about the dolphins' underwater movements. The results of the study will provide zoos and aquariums worldwide with important information on how to best provide these animals training, enrichment, and exhibit characteristics that lead to optimal welfare. If you visit the zoo this fall or winter, you may see our dolphin Spree sporting one of these Fitbit devices. We also work with preserves around the world on different conservation field projects. The Punta San Juan Preserve in Peru is home to over 10,000 sea lions. Our veterinaries work in conjunction with Peruvian scientists to conduct fieldwork that helps us better understand how to protect the populations living there. Our Sarasota Dolphin Research Program is the world's longest running study of a wild dolphin population, focusing on many aspects of dolphin biology, including health, behavior, genetics, environmental change, including the recent red tide incidents, and adverse interactions with humans. The program is unique in many respects. Nowhere else in the world can researchers work with a group of wild dolphins in their natural habitat where the medical and behavioral history of each individual is so well known. One of the conservation efforts you can experience for yourself at the zoo is our Pangolin Conservation Project. You just saw a picture, but what exactly is a pangolin? Who knows what a pangolin is here? You do? Yes. So it's a mammal covered in small scales that are comprised of keratin, which is the same stuff that your fingernails or hair is made out of. Most tend to be arboreal and nocturnal, and it's said in the wild that they eat exclusively ants and termites. There are 8 species of pangolin, 4 located in Asia and 4 in Africa. And finally, the word pangolin is derived from a term that means to roll up. These are some examples of the different species of pangolin. You can see they're all a little bit different, but all have those characteristic scales all over their body. And this is how they use their scales for protection. They roll up in a tight ball, and when they're covered in those scales, they cannot succumb as much to predators.
Look at what goes on to it.
They roll up. But unfortunately, humans have also found a use for these scales. Pangolins are currently the world's most hunted and illegally trafficked mammals, with more than 1 million wild pangolins killed in the last decade, as interest grows for their meat and scales, which are used for jewelry and medicinal purposes. But remember, it's made of keratin, so it's the same as powdering up your fingernails and eating them. While a petition has been listed to file all 8 species of pangolin as endangered, currently only 1 species is as listed as endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act. Pangolin products can still be found for sale in the United States, including in Illinois. I'll touch on what CZS is doing to address the sale of these products a little later. But right now, CZS is leading the development of a collaborative pangolin consortium for the white-bellied tree pangolin. With 6 other institutions across the country, CZS is working to create a self-sustaining population of white-bellied pangolin in North America. CZS has a dozen pangolin right now, 5 of which have given birth since their arrival here. Currently, little is known about the pangolin habitat, nutrition, and reproduction in the wild. Therefore, a large part of this project includes gathering information about the species, which will allow us to better care for the individuals at our institution and better protect those in the wild. You can currently meet one of our pangolin, David, who's on exhibit in Habitat Africa, the forest. And the conservation work we do is important because today's environment is changing at a rapid pace. For example, at the turn of the 20th century, there were 3 million African elephants and about 100,000 Asian elephants. Today, there are an estimated 500,000 African elephants and nearly 40,000 wild Asian elephants. This is Timur, our Amur leopard cub that was born last year. Native to Russia and China, there are only 82 Amur leopards in managed care and only 65 left in the wild due to deforestation and habitat destruction. Polar bears are losing habitat at a startling rate due to rising global temperatures. A deadly fungus is decimating amphibian populations worldwide. But there is hope. These are some of the success stories. The California condor, the bison, gray wolf, oryx, golden lion tamarin, they all made a comeback due to help from managed care organizations like zoos. And these are some images our CEO, Stuart Straw, likes to show of the time he spent researching birds in South America. He's a very strong believer that the currency of conservation is in people. You need to make conservation relevant to people where they are. Otherwise, they will not choose to change their practices and protect endangered species and habitats. And that is what we aim to do. 195 million Americans visit accredited zoos and aquariums every year. That's more than all other cultural institutions combined. And conservation is diverse. Over 87% of Americans live in urban areas and might not have easy access to natural areas. At the zoo, our goal is to provide opportunities for individuals to get up close and personal with nature and wildlife, inspiring conservation leadership in our guests and visitors. Through our Nature Start program, we engage and interact with young children and their families, utilizing nature play learning to encourage appreciation of the environment. The zoo also travels outside the park to communities on the south and west side to offer STEM programming for students in elementary, school, and junior high. Students interested in STEM and college and career readiness can also join our King Conservation Science Scholars Program, where participants take part in interactive workshops on animals and conservation, plan community projects, and engage in volunteer interpretation at the zoo. When people think of zoos, they don't always think of all these programs and opportunities that the institutions provide. When it comes to elected officials, part of my job is informing them about these programmatic elements and identifying the zoo as an expert resource that is available should they need advice on any specific conservation issues. So one of the questions I usually field is, why should cultural institutions build political and social capital? In this current climate, the importance of politics may be clear, but why should zoos and other institutions specifically be spending time and effort to build goodwill with their local officials. So first off, we can influence proactive legislative initiatives. Scientists estimate that the total number of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish has declined more than 50% since 1970. We're coming to a point that without critical intervention today, we're facing the very real possibility of losing some of our planet's most interesting creatures in the not too near future. Many of these amazing animals have ranges that extend into our backyards here in Illinois, which we can protect by passing laws at the state level. Some of these animals do not call Illinois home, but their products can still be found here. So to that end, Illinois was the first inland state in the US to adopt a shark fin ban in 2012. Just this past August, the House and Senate passed, and the governor signed a bill to prohibit the importation, sale, and purchase of ivory products. This next session, CZS will be introducing a bill to ban the sale of pangolin scales in Illinois. By taking a stand against pangolin scales in Illinois, we can catch the attention of our federal elected officials and hopefully build support for pangolin protection via an endangered species listing in the future. Building political capital early on also helps us react quickly to legislation that could impact the zoo. For example, last year, Illinois became the first state ever to ban traveling elephant acts. The legislation was targeted at circuses, but other legislative initiatives could be aimed at permanent managed care institutions in the state of Illinois. It's always important to be on top of new initiatives that are being introduced in Springfield. Finally, capital funding, grant funding, and annual funding from the forest preserves of Cook County is crucial to maintaining Brookfield Zoo's status as a world-class institution, industry leader, and a welcoming place for all guests. So building relationships is a very important part of the job, and luckily, it's also the fun part. We engage elected and government officials with the zoo's conservation, education, and outreach efforts through in-depth tours of our conservation programs and invitations to visit community programming available in their districts, including our ZAP programs, Nature Start, King Scholar events, and others. From time to time, our members and guests also get involved with our outreach efforts. For example, we recently sent over 2,500 signatures we collected from guests and conservation-minded individuals to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who are considering some regulatory changes that would weaken the Endangered Species Act. The Society supports the Act and the protections it provides for our world's most vulnerable species. This action alert is still up on our website in case you'd like to get more information on the topic or reach out to your officials. And I'll leave you with some of our important births this year. Hopefully you've already met some of them, and a few upcoming events we have at the zoo this fall and winter. So these are our Amur leopard cubs, Jalen and Samson, that were born this spring. As I mentioned previously, Amur leopards are critically endangered, so this is a great success for their species. CZS was also proud to welcome 9 Togo slippery frog tadpoles this year, making Brookfield Zoo the only zoological institution in the world to successfully breed this critically endangered African species. Also in 2018, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service confiscated several giant Chinese salamanders, which is what you see here, being shipped through the mail as a part of the illegal pet trade. Unable to be introduced in the wild, they were brought to Brookfield Zoo. At 5 feet long at adulthood, giant Chinese salamanders are the largest amphibians in the world, and also critically endangered due to the pet trade. On June 1st, our female western lowland gorilla was born. These gorillas are also critically endangered due to commercial hunting and habitat destruction. You can catch her playing with Nora and Zachary, who are both under 4 years old. We also had a Kirk's dik-dik calf born at Brookfield Zoo on June 4th, which weighed in at about 1.5 pounds. Kirk's dik-dik is the world's smallest antelope species. They can live in both dense forests and open plains and are found throughout Africa. Finally, we welcomed a porcupet, which is the official name for a baby porcupine, named Quilbert, who was born in July. He's the first prehensile tail porcupine to be born at Brookfield Zoo. After close monitoring, it became clear his mother was not going to provide proper maternal care. She chose not to allow him to nurse, so animal staff made the decision to intervene and hand rear the baby, who is thriving.
He's cute.
He's very cute.
So cute.
As for events, beginning this weekend, I believe, Boo at the Zoo runs Saturdays and Sundays through October 28th. It features fun fall activities for the family, including a corn maze, haunted hayride, pumpkin smasher, and of course, pumpkins for all of the animals. Our Veterans Day celebration takes place on November 11th, where all guests get in free to the zoo. The event features military memorabilia and vehicle displays, as well as performances and resource tables. And new this year are a reindeer run in November, a 2-mile run located entirely within the zoo, and a Lights and Lagers festival, where you can sample different adult beverages and kick off the holiday magic season. So, the Chicago Zoological Society recently unveiled a 5-year strategic plan encompassing the organization's goals from 2019 to 2023. I'd like to close by showing you a short 5-minute video about where we've been and where we're going, and share a couple different voices with you from the zoo.
Brookfield Zoo opened to much fanfare in 1934. The zoo was created with these open-air exhibits, large park-like spaces. The idea that people could come here not just to see animals, but to learn about zoology and to promote the conservation of wildlife and nature. That's in our charter. Each year, 2.3 million guests come to Brookfield Zoo. We believe that every child should have an opportunity to see wildlife and nature. We work with underserved communities around the region and vulnerable populations such as inner city kids, veterans. We work with kids and families with developmental disabilities because there's a healing component to having animals in your life. These are things that we believe are necessary as we go forward as a community. In the next 5 years, we have great plans. Our charge forward is a conservation charge to ourselves, to wildlife and nature, and to the communities we serve. We want to inspire people by connections with animals and nature. We want to engage them in what they can do, both in their communities and around the globe, and restore those connections of communities and people with wildlife and nature. People are the answer to conservation.
My favorite animals have to be spiders. I think they're beautiful and actually turned out to be my very first pet. There are about 614 species of spiders living in U.S. croplands alone. Without these spiders in the world, scientists feel that we would plunge into a worldwide famine. We would find it very hard to live in the world that we occupy today. We inspire our guests by storytelling, and the stories that we tell are meant to relate to our guests so that it provokes further thought or action. For example, one of my colleagues saw a little girl at our arachnids exhibit. The little girl came in afraid to walk up to the habitats to see the spiders. Yvette told her a story about overcoming her fear. The little girl was so taken with that story, she walked right up to the habitat, said, "What is this spider's name?" She said, "I want to name it Furry." It's an amazing thing to see when you can transform people and you can actually help them become conservation leaders. We also inspire people who may not ever come to the zoo through social media or by going out to our communities and engaging organizations such as our libraries. Wildlife and nature is part of us, and we are all working towards a better tomorrow for ourselves and the animals and plants we share the world with.
Our goal here at Brookfield Zoo is to get people to look at wildlife and engage with nature more. For the last 21 years, I've been the Chicago Zoological Society Community Outreach Educator. My job is to take a little bit of the zoo out to underserved communities in the city and work with families from birth to about 14 years of age. The children that I work with that live in the city are limited to what they see as far as nature. They might see a squirrel, they might see a bird, but as far as green space, they have to travel quite a distance to engage. We've seen thousands of students go through our program. We're one of the longest running after-school STEM programs, still alive and working today. When I started many years ago, a lot of the kids that sat in front of me for the first time were maybe 5, 6 years old. And 21 years later, these kids are doing amazing things with their lives. Some of them have even worked for us here at the Chicago Zoological Society. Diane and Danny Vasquez started with me at a very young age and now are working with me, teaching children who are now their same age when they started many years ago. If it wasn't for the programs Brookfield Zoo provided, they wouldn't be where they are today because they've enriched and changed their lives, so they carry that conservation message with them throughout their life.
Little Anthony is a white-bellied tree pangolin, a very important conservation animal to Brookfield Zoo. He was born here, and he's about 1.5 years old. There are 8 species of pangolins in the world, 4 in Africa and 4 in Asia, and they're the most trafficked mammal in the entire world. Their main source of trafficking is bushmeat and traditional Chinese medicine. Unfortunately, people think that their scales will actually help cure a lot of different ailments, and those things are not true. One of our endangered western lowland gorillas gave birth on her habitat, and that's just a wonderful example of the way that we can create a bond with people. There were people here that actually got to witness it, and I'm sure that was a life-changing event for them, and hopefully it will help connect them with what we're trying to do here, the continuation of life, the breeding of endangered species, restoration of habitats, restoration of species. There are so many projects that we're involved with, both locally and internationally, that are so important for the health of the world.
In this new strategic plan, it's up to us to inspire our guests, to protect animals, to engage our communities with conservation, and to build and restore lasting connections between people and wildlife. It is also our hope and our passion to create conservation leaders for the future. We have early childhood education programs, we have a middle school program in science education, and we have our King Conservation Scholars, young men and women like Rebecca Turcios, first in her family to go to college and is now studying veterinary medicine at Cornell University. They want to see this black rhino here in the wild again. They want to see this species come back in the wild. That's the kind of visceral connections that we make between wildlife, nature, and people. This is the future of conservation, and that's what the Chicago Zoological Society is all about.
I wanted to leave you with that. Hopefully you caught the shout out to the library. Pretty much an identical picture to where we are now. But now I'd be happy to take any questions anyone has. Oops.
Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Here, I have a microphone, so if you'll wait for me to come by, and this is just so that our friends on TV can hear you.
I was under the impression that it was already illegal to sell ivory, but they're just now, just recently stopped importing it.
Yeah, so I believe there's been a couple different, and that's my fault because I meant to brush up on that before I came here, but as I understand it, it has been illegal to transport it to the United States, and then in some states it is illegal to sell it or at least pass it along. And I know in Illinois they've tried for many years to ban the sale of it, but the NRA has a strong lobby of guns made of ivory, so that had been hard for a couple years. But this year they managed to do it. So it might be closing some of those loopholes that are still available for people to sell their items, but I believe, antiques and things like that, you're allowed to pass those along.
I was surprised by that as well.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing, the pangolin scales in particular, they were just listed on CITES, so they cannot be shipped in between countries. It's illegal to ship them to the United States, but if they get here from illegally, then technically there's nothing stopping people from selling them in Illinois. So it's another kind of loophole we're trying to close and generally bring awareness about the species. Yes?
I just want to comment that I attended, I think it was,
Sorry.
just want to comment that I think it was the year before last, I attended a program that was it was a conservation program. I think you have it annually, and that there were individuals who were not gamekeepers, but conservationists from different parts of Africa, South America, who came and gave presentations, and there was an opportunity to meet them in person as well as see their presentation. And I just want to highly recommend it to everyone. It was a wonderful experience. And the thing that I think impressed me the most, although the animals were great, was that they were really working with the local communities. Particularly, I remember in India, a place in Africa, and then also South America, to enlist them to do everything they could to protect the animals and to appreciate them. And I thought, wow, that's great. I guess this is one of the more recent approaches, but it seems like such a wonderful idea.
People often ask, how can you make a difference from, all the way here to elephants? But it is involving that local community, because we're not the ones that have elephants in our backyard eating our crops or, causing danger on our streets. So you really have to work with the locals. How can you address the elephants that are in their communities that allows them both to live in harmony? And I think that conference is, we either have it every year or every other year, and it is open to the public. So thank you for that shout out.
Anyone else? Yeah.
I heard the word elephants mentioned, and I still miss the elephants. Is this on?
Yep.
Okay. How much land would they need to get elephants back? Or is it even impossible? I mean, tell me.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the question. That's the number one question we always get. And the answer would be the animal welfare standards are constantly developing. So the herd size that they now recommend to keep elephants in would require a very large space of land. So we would be talking about probably changing the whole northwest corner of the zoo and making it a multi-species exhibit for elephants. So it makes it a project that can't be jumped into lightly. Given the funding that would, be needed to kind of create that whole new exhibit. And of course, we would want to have a world-class exhibit for elephants that holds them to the best welfare standards. So,
we just walked through the northwest part of the zoo. A lot of empty space there, it seemed to me. In fact, you can't even walk all the way to the end of the path as you used to be able to. So, is anybody plotting ahead somehow to possibly use that?
We did have animals at the conservation barn that you used to be able to go past and see. And I think with animals that have left our institution for other institutions, since there's nothing back there, I think they close that off a little bit. But it's constantly in our plans, and as we have our strategic plan through 2023 and even our longer strategic plan, it's definitely going to be the discussion points.
Keep working.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Questions?
Yeah.
I could probably talk loud enough, but yeah. So, what are your primary legislative pushes now? And I suppose they would be available on the website if people wanted to join them in some way.
Yeah, so I would say our two right now are, one that we just listed with the polar bear photo was our Endangered Species Act push. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife had a proposed rule out that individuals, anyone who wanted to, could comment on. That comment period has closed, but they're still in the process of reviewing those comments. So one of the ways you could take action is contacting your local federal elected officials. So there's some information on that online. And then our big push will be banning the pangolin scales, which we plan to introduce that bill in Springfield in about January. So we'll definitely have some news stories and information on our website then.
And then how many children do you think that you do an outreach to on an annual basis?
Outreach, so through our community programs, it's about the ones that go into local libraries and schools, it's about 4,000. But we have, like it said on there, 20,000 students coming physically to the zoo. And then we do have an animal ambassador program that will go off. It'll go to senior communities, it'll go to veteran events, but it will also go to schools and domestic violence shelters and things like that. So we're touching people additionally in that way. It's a smaller program, but that does go out in the community too.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a lot of endangered animals, and there's a lot of things you can do to help them. So, and here's another question. So, we remember when the zoo had the elephants?
I do remember.
Yeah, and why don't they just get them back?
Yeah, it's a long process of building the right home for them.
Yeah, they need a bunch of space since they're extremely big, of course.
They did. We wouldn't want to put them back into what we had before. We would want to create something big and grand, and that's what takes a while.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do it.
Maybe you should write a letter to the director and ask him about it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.